So I have uploaded 2 references to the classroom. There's this one and a side skull. I want you guys to ignore the lines everywhere. These lines are not constructions that you need to worry about. I grabbed these from an actual anatomy website because they were really, like, they're the best skulls I could find that actually look like real skulls and have the details that I want you guys to be drawing. So I'm just making a quick note, like, these aren't constructions of any kind. They literally, off to the sides where I cropped it, say like things that you don't need to know about anatomy of a skull. So that's why all those lines are everywhere there. So what I'm going to do here is talk to you guys about when you draw, you start with a circle. Well, you don't start with a circle. We start with lines, but I'm going to start the circle for the sake of what I'm showing you here, right? So there, right there, I'm going to crop this in a little bit. That is how your circle should fall. The circle that we talked about starting and drawing in your thing yesterday, that's exactly where that thing would fall. And what I taught you guys was that the first thing that we actually need to do is draw this thing, right? We draw this sort of cross shape like this that we then put the circle inside of. So these lines that you learned to draw yesterday, this is exactly how they fall. So if you were looking at your construction and you were about to put a skull inside of it, these are those thirds that we talked about. Here's this middle chunk, here's this top chunk, and then here is that bottom chunk with that extended line like this. And these things right here, 1, 2, and 3/3 are literally completely even, exactly like we talked about when we saw this stuff yesterday, right? So I wanted to show you this actually happening. I kind of prove it to you guys that, like, this construction that I showed you guys actually does work. So if you were to draw a skull inside of that thing that we learned about yesterday, this is exactly what it would look like. And I even told you guys the next step was you take the sides, you bring them down, and you sort of ignore that bottom part of the circle, right? And then you kind of create this shape right here that actually sort of forms the chin and that bottom part of a face. And then what you have is an actual what a face looks like, because that idea of starting as an egg, right? Because you've probably seen this before from other people, and if you haven't, this is a thing a lot of people do, is they actually start the face like this, and then they take their lines and they cut it in half like this, and then they try to split up their proportions from that. But what we have, the problem that we run into is this. Yes, some people's faces are this round, but they're not really. Like, our bone structure underneath our face is this hard, rigid structure that makes our faces have way more shape than you think that they would. So it's really important that you understand that, like, this thing that I'm teaching you guys here, if this is your way of doing things, try your hardest to learn this new way that I'm teaching you, because it's going to improve the sort of realism and shape of your head much better. It's also going to help you for drawing faces that are different. For when you see that face where the person has a skinnier and longer face, or a wider and shorter or broader face, it's not just an egg every single time that we try to change into a face. It's an actual form that we can start to shape and turn and kind of mold into something else. Okay, so this is that. I wanted to show you this so you could see that. And now I'm going to do a quick demo of me drawing it. And then that way you guys can, like, see it happen. And as I draw it, I'm going to talk about important things to pay attention to. And then your instruction, your actual assignment, is going to be to draw one skull of either the. Okay, so now let's talk about this. I'm just going to do the front view for the sake of this demo here, guys. But I wanted you guys to, like, kind of see this happening in real time as well. That way I can kind of point out and make sense of some things. Okay, so the very first thing I'm going to do is just build that construction real fast, right? So it's a cross. I find the middle. I make an even cross here. And then I sort of just round off this part here. Remember I talked about how, like, the circle is not super important for being perfect. It just needs to kind of start creating that shape. And then I cut things off here and right here to make my first thirds, my 1 and my 2/3. And then I extend this, and I can double check it because it should be the same as that. And then I just sort of bring this down and bring this over. And notice how loose I'm being for this part of the jaw here, guys. Until I'm actually ready to start drawing what the actual jaw of the skull looks like, I don't want these things to be super tight, because this is going to change as I go. And I don't want to, like, make it so rigid that once I start to draw the skull, I trust my constructions more than I trust my reference, right? Because I'm looking at this reference as I draw this, and I want to make sure that these shapes are kind of the same. Okay, the first place that most of you are going to start, because it's just kind of what new drawers do, is probably the eyes and the nose, because they're the most detailed and, like, the most sort of recognizable thing. So let's talk about that, right? I'm going to bring this in even a little bit more. You're going to draw these eyes. Here's some things to look for. they slant. They're not perfect. They're not even super round. They're actually kind of like this sort of rectangular sort of oval shape like this. And they look like that, right? They're not this. They're not a perfect circle, right? They're also quite large. They literally take up, like when you look at them as sockets, because we think about them as eyes and not as eye sockets, they take up a huge amount of the space of the skull here, right? So there's one there, and there's not what you want to do. That's kind of what I'm going to do here, is show you guys what you want to do and what you don't want to do. Here's another thing that you don't want to do. A lot of students like to see the nose as this upside down heart shape, and they want to like really hard edge line like this, create that shape like this, right? When we're talking about value and we're talking about shading, what we actually want to look at is the how the inside of this shape is really dark, but the outside of this shape is really light. And there's almost like this floaty line right here where you shade like kind of up to it until you get to that edge, and then it kind of disappears and then kind of fades back in like that. And that's how you get more of a realistic look to that as well. There's almost like this white line that floats right here between where the value starts and where it stops. That kind of creates that edge of the bone. Notice how I'm shading through everything too here, right? I am putting a little bit of value in almost every spot that I see here, not just in the areas where it's super dark. Like obviously I'm going to come through here, and this is going to be my darkest spot right here, is this eye socket here. But that doesn't mean that there's not also value in other places. That doesn't mean that there's not like a little bit of a bone structure here, or I want to shade this a little bit here. Notice what I'm doing here. There's like this bone structure that comes like this. It jets back. It kind of creates this cheekbone right here, and then this little indention right here. You see all these details that I'm adding right now to the side of the face and to the skull that have nothing to do with the eyes or the nose or the mouth. This is probably the biggest mistake that students make when they draw a skull, or even when they draw a face, is they don't realize that, hey guys, there's actually a lot happening here. This skull is not a flat object. Things shoot up, they shoot down, they shoot around. Even how the jaw connects from right here to right here. See how I like dented in right there? And then you have this bone right here. And then you have the mouth sort of barrel of the jaw. And it's dark right here. And it's a little bit lighter right there. I'm just sort of paying attention to all the little different values and things here as I go. And notice how I'm not trying to put too much detail in one place. I'm moving around a lot as well to kind of make sure that I don't commit too much to one area. I'm just sort of paying attention to all the value and where the light spots are and where the dark spots are. And this is just kind of a big review of all the things that you would have learned about sort of like keeping your eye on where to shade and where not to shade from drawing and painting one. Okay, now let's talk about the teeth real quick. So when you go in to draw the teeth, this is probably the most important thing ever. So let's just do like a bad sort of example here, you know, like maybe just too hard with the lines, too harsh with the edges here. And then you build your barrel of your mouth here like this. Teeth, not a straight line all the way across like this. I want you to imagine what this shape of the barrel of the mouth is a cylinder. This literal mouth shape, these teeth are a cylinder. So the line that you make for your teeth are like this actually. They curve like this, like an ellipse. So the bottom of your teeth and the top of your teeth curves back and the space like this. That way when you come through and draw your teeth, you kind of already know where they're gonna go before you start to draw them. Because what ends up happening is when you just do this all the way straight across, you end up with these big teeth where they're way too big and they take up too much of the face like this. And you end up with these teeth when you need these teeth that look like they're spitting back. Also notice that each tooth is smaller than the last. As teeth go back in the space, the first one's the biggest and they get a little bit smaller as they go back. Here's my biggest tooth. And then they turn into almost like little tiny slivers by the time they're way back here in the mouth. And yes, our teeth are white, but guess what? we do shade them because they are in shadow, because they are inside of our mouth and not a lot of light gets in there. And that's another technique for making teeth look more like teeth and not like a scary smile that's just staring at us in the face. Okay, so basically what you're seeing over here too is just like I'm focusing way too much on outlines, right? I'm just seeing the lines and I'm focusing too much on outlines over here. And over here, I'm paying more attention to the form and the value and sort of the shades of that thing, okay? So that is what your technique, your assignment actually is. So you do